Welcome here into Teal, the show. I'm Jamal St here alongside Frangie. We are counting down the days to training camp. It is almost here tonight. We're going to take a look at the Jaguars defense. Frank, when we talk about this Jaguars team, we kind of know what the offense is going to look like-ish because Doug Peterson, Press Taylor, Trevor Lawrence, you know that.
Right.
Defense, a little bit of a different story because Ryan Nielsen is new to Jacksonville, and we just haven't seen it yet.
I think everyone's excited about what he brings, but we don't know. We really don't know. But this guy's a football coach, man. He's got the low voice. He's got the broad shoulders. This is a football guy, Ryan Nielsen. I can't wait to watch him coach that defense. It's going to be very fun to watch, but there's a lot to learn about that defense because there's a lot we don't know yet.
Yeah, look, I'm really excited. When they were looking for a defensive coordinator, the top guy on my list from day one was Ryan Nielsen. And then they go out and land him. This is great. And from day one, the players have raved about him. His former players have raved about him. So it should be a good sign. So we'll go through the Jaguars defense from kind of top to bottom and try and see if we can figure out just where some of the question marks are, where the strengths of this defense are, at least in our expectations, before we see what Coach Nielsen really wants to do with them out on the field.
And I think a big part of that, and don't underestimate this, is the change in the scheme. The one thing that they did before, Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker never seemed like stand-up linebackers. That's what they were playing in at 3-4. They were stand-up guys. Now, they put their hand on the ground some. They're defensive ends, man. They're both big, physical defensive ends. And Josh Hines-Allen had this phenomenal season last year, but I still think he's an end more than a linebacker. Put your hand on the ground. I think the biggest change is those two guys. I think together they may have an enormous season because the defense is structured differently. I can't wait to watch.
It's so funny you said that. So we'll start talking about the defensive line. I was watching an interview that Josh Hines-Allen did with Cam Jordan on his podcast, and Josh talked about one of his early conversations with Ryan Nielsen. He said Coach Nielsen told him he wants him to go forward. He said, enough said, I'm on board, Coach.
Right, yeah.
That was all he needed to hear.
And that's what, and as much as it affects Josh Hines-Allen, who had a huge year, think about the effect it's going to have on Trayvon Walker. When Trayvon Walker's not thinking and standing up and dropping into coverage and he's just getting after the quarterback. Look, Josh had such a good season that Trayvon's pretty darn good year was kind of hidden. He had a double-digit sack season, and he's coming around. I can't wait to watch those two guys.
All right, let's talk about that defensive line group, Frank. On Monday night, we talked about the wide receiver room that was rebuilt. This defensive line room might have gone through just as much of a drastic change as anywhere on the roster. Because now you look at Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen as those defensive ends. Now you also add Eric Armstead, who is a fantastic player on his own, to go along with a couple of rookies. You spent a second-round pick on Mason Smith. Some kind of way, he's going to get on the field, at least a little bit.
They like him a long, a very physical player. The two most important questions about the defensive line are health questions. Is Eric Armstead healthy? Because he was not healthy at times in San Francisco. And is Devon Hamilton healthy? If Devon is back to being Devon, and they think he is, he was set for a huge year last year, and then he had that tough health issue that really floored him for the entire year. He's such a tough guy. He came back and tried to play through it, but now he's healthy. If Armstead and Devon Hamilton are healthy, you know Roy Robertson-Harris is going to help the cause. You know you've got some numbers there. Mason Smith, to your point, is going to help the cause. But if those two guys are healthy, that's huge for the Jaguars defense.
You know, the guy that I think is going to benefit from the depth that they've added along this defensive line the most is Roy Robertson-Harris. He's played a huge percentage of snaps. Last year, he played about 60% of the Jaguar snaps. The next guy behind him was at like 30%.
Yeah.
So taking a little bit of snaps off his plate, I've talked to him after games on games where he basically was like, I never left the field.
Yeah.
Because of depth issues, because of injuries that happened. So now being able to get him back in that rotational role, keep him fresh, maybe fresh in late in the season, he's going to benefit just as much as anybody else.
Yeah, they did not have a volume of players.
Yeah.
They've really never had that in recent years where they've had good frontline players. They haven't had depth. They haven't had a volume of players. I think they've got that now. Remember this, too. Eric Armstead's going to play outside some. He's going to play inside some. So they've got now versatile guys that can play a lot of. Mason Smith's the guy that can play inside. He's one of the few guys they have that's legitimately 320 pounds, but he's also long enough to go play outside. So they've got versatile guys now as well as having a bunch of guys.
All right, we're going to take the turn after this break and talk a little bit about those defensive backs and maybe a rookie defensive back that's been catching everybody's attention. That's straight ahead when Teal the Show returns. Welcome back here into Teal the Show. All right, Frank, we talked about the defensive line group in the first half of the show. Let's talk about the linebacker room. We kind of know where that's at. Devin Lloyd, Foye Oluokun going to be out there, but in Ryan Nielsen's defense, there's at least a third linebacker in your official starter group.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the base, that'll change some things because what happens, let's assume that they still play with Foye and Devin Lloyd as the two stand-up linebackers,
right.
the two inside linebackers if you're in an old 3-4. Well, now in a 4-3, you still kind of have a Mike and a Will. Who goes and plays that Sam spot, which is over the tight end, and in base you have three linebackers. Chad Muma and Ventrell Miller are the guys that are going to get the look. I think Ventrell's more of an inside guy. Chad Muma, I think both of them are really. I really thought at one point Devin Lloyd would go out there, and then he would move back to the middle and nickel. But it doesn't look like, at least from what we've seen so far, that that's the way it's going to be. But I'll tell you this, Ventrell Miller's a good player. He could not stay healthy at Florida, and that was a problem. And then he got hurt when he got here. But he is fast, Jamal. He's got a burst. He's a really good football player. It reminds me a little bit of Sam Mills, who was such a good player, undersized. Zach Thomas, Sam Mills, the undersized guys. But he reminds me of Sam Mills a little bit, who all Sam Mills did is tackle everybody every play. And I'm telling you, Ventrell Miller's got a chance to be a good player. Keep an eye on Ventrell. I really like him.
That's a couple of guys in Canton with gold jackets you're comparing him to, so those are some lofty expectations. But Ventrell, when he's been healthy out there on the field, definitely has looked the part for the Jaguars. All right, so with the linebacker room down, that brings us to the secondary. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the corners, because I think that's one of the few starting jobs that's up for grabs when training camp starts. We know that Tyson Campbell's penciled into one spot, but who's your other corner that's starting, and who's your nickel corner? These are questions that are going to be decided out there on the field during training camp. I think they have an idea of what they want, but there's at least a rookie, Jaguars Jones, who's throwing his hat in the ring that maybe they weren't expecting to be ready as early as he is.
I think, Joel, on Monday's show, I told you I thought the offensive line was the biggest question mark in the offense. That means it's not going to be good. It's the one we know the least about. I think the secondary is the biggest question on the defense. You're right. Tyson Campbell starts at one spot. I think if they had their druthers, it would be Jaguars Jones facing Ronald Darby and maybe beating him out. They love Jaguars Jones. They love what they saw from him. I think Darnell Savage is going to be the nickel. I'd be surprised. I think they went to Green Bay and got him to be the nickel, even though he'd been a safety there. I don't think there's any doubt that's what they want him to do. And I think if he doesn't wind up being the nickel, they'd be a little bit disappointed. Having said that, Jaguars Jones can play in there. Boy, I like him, though. I mean, I like his personality. I like being around him. I like listening to him. And he's a good player. He, like you said it at the top before we went to break, he's the star that nobody knew was going to be a star, and they haven't even played a game yet. So I think, to your question, I bet Jaguars Jones wins one job outside. Tyson's going to be the other guy, and I think Darnell Savage is going to be the nickel. I'm making predictions already. We haven't even gotten there, but that's how I think they're going to play.
We're rolling with it, but I like it. I think that's how it's going to come together, but that also opens the conversation for safety.
Yeah.
Last year, I think we have a pretty good idea of what happens, but originally when Darnell Savage was signed, we said, oh, he's going to start at safety. Right. But if he's your nickel, then that opens the door for Antonio Johnson, who was a fantastic rookie for them a year ago when he finally got onto the football field. Injuries kind of held him back a little bit, but to play him next to Andre Cisco, which gives you another combination of safeties.
They love Antonio Johnson. Andre Cisco's a good player. He goes and finds the ball. He's a ball hawking safety. They love Antonio Johnson. They love what I was with them in Detroit last year when they were doing the joint practices. He couldn't go. It's when he got hurt. And you could see him chomping at the bit to be out there and wanted to be out there and wanted to be out there. They love what they've got in Antonio Johnson. Everybody knows in the 5th round was way too low for him. Yes. Everybody knows he was. Everybody talked about what a steal it was. Well, sometimes you talk about a steal, and then you get a guy and you find out, well, why he went a little lower. Not with this guy. It was a steal. He will be their starting safety. No, you're right. There's growing pains when you're a first-time starter. He's going to be starting for the first time, and that means growing pains. But I like their secondary, what they can be. There's a lot of questions about that group, Jamal. But boy, if they can be what we think they might be able to be, it could be a really good group.
Yeah, there's definitely some potential there. It could all come together. It's going to be different because this is going to be a very different system, and that impacts the secondary the most out of anybody. You go from a very zone-heavy defense to a very man-heavy defense. Your responsibilities change just a little bit there, but ultimately it's just make sure the other guy doesn't catch the ball.
I also think this. The teams that are really good, if their defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator, based on what side of the ball the head coach kind of spends more time on, you give it to him. Ryan Nielsen is the head coach of the defense. It's very clear. Talking to Doug Peterson, he said he brought him in. He let him bring him some of his assistants. This is Ryan Nielsen's defense. He's the head coach of the defense, and he's been entrusted with it, and that's going to be fun to watch.
All right, I asked you this on Monday night, and I'm going to go ahead and ask you again, just about a separate side of the ball. This time last year, I think we felt pretty good about the defense. And I think if you watched Teal the show last year, there was a large chunk of the show where we sat here and we said the defense was carrying this team to wins.
Right.
So the defense was by no stretch in the early part of the season bad. Do you feel like the defense is in a better spot at this point than maybe it was this time a year ago? Have they improved?
I do, Jamal. I do think so. I feel a little differently about the defense and the offense. I do think it's improved. but there's way more unknowns. We talked Monday about the offense. There weren't a lot of unknowns. You know the system, you know the scheme, you know the quarterback, you know the key guys. On the defense, there's a lot of unknowns. It's a new scheme. I think it's going to fit them well, but it's new. Chad Moolman and Ventrell Miller have to learn a new position. Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen are going to have to play differently. Antonio Johnson's a first-time starter at safety. Darnell Savage is going to be a starter, I think, on a new team. Ronald Darby's going to play a bunch on a new team. So I think it is, to your question, I think it's going to be a better defense, and I like the way they set up better than they did a year ago. But, man, there's some unknowns on the defense. That's the question. It could be some fun answers and good answers, but a lot of unknowns on the defense.
Who's the key on the defense to unlocking this thing?
Yeah, I still think.
Is it Josh?
It has to be. Josh Hines-Allen, I think, is one of the best. I saw some list where they didn't have him as one of the 20 best edge rushers. Did you see this?
I did see it.
What are we doing? I mean, if 17 and a half sacks doesn't make, and you're a young player and you're known as a hard worker and great locker room guy, if that doesn't get you on someone's top 20, get rid of the top 20. They didn't know what they're talking about. But he's still the key to the defense. Foye Oluokun's a big part of this defense. Sure. He really is. Tyson Campbell's a big part of this defense. I think that's the three players that I'm going to watch the most, because in this day and age, you have to have cornerback play, really good cornerback play. The Chiefs had that great cornerback play.
Yeah.
Had everything to do with them winning the Super Bowl, just like Patrick Mahomes did. So keep an eye on Tyson Campbell. Keep an eye on Foye Oluokun. But Josh Hines-Allen is their best player, and he's got to play well.
All right, we'll see what happens. Training camp officially starts next week. It's only a couple of days away. We will be out there, and we will have Teal the shows rolling your way all the way through whenever the Jaguars finish playing. We'll, so sometime in 2025, hopefully, maybe we're talking like February.
Hopefully later, that's right.
The later in 2025, the better. Hey, thanks for hanging out with us tonight, Frank. Thanks for being here. Thank you at home for tuning in. Good night, everybody, and go Jags.